This is a very important issue, and as I said yesterday, many parents are telling us they need help. And that's what our legislation is about. Our message to parents is clear. We have your back.
Well, should children be banned from social media? The answer to that question in Australian politics is now unequivocally a yes, at least from the major parties. You just heard the Communications Minister, Michelle Rowland, there telling parents the government has their back. At the moment, there's not much more detail to the government's plans than that. South Australian Labor Premier Peter Malinauskas was the first political leader in Australia to call for an age limit on social media. The federal opposition leader, Peter Dutton, then joined the push a few months ago. So politically, the Prime Minister was under pressure to jump on board. And this week, that's exactly what he's done. There's no decision yet on what the age limit for social media should be. There's no detail yet on practically how this will be done. And there's also a big question over whether this can all be sorted out, legislated, laws put in place by the time the election rolls around. It's due early next year. Right now, this is about signalling to worried parents, but I'm keen to explore whether this is in fact a good idea at all. Is a social media ban the best way to keep kids safe? I'm David Spears on Ngunnawal Country at Parliament House in Canberra. Welcome to Insiders on Background. Well, everyone seems to have a view when it comes to the impact social media is having on children. Professor Sonia Livingstone happens to be a leading world expert. Professor Livingstone is a British scholar at the London School of Economics, Department of Media and Communications. She's advised the British government, the European Parliament, the OECD and the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. Sonia Livingstone, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
So I thought it might perhaps be worth starting with an explanation of what the dangers are and what the benefits are of social media when it comes to children. What do you think?
Well, we do have a lot of research on both the benefits, both the opportunities that social media offers children and the risks. Starting with the risks, we normally divide them according to the 4 Cs. There are risks of content, what kind of content children see. It might be violent, it might be hateful, it might encourage self-harm. There are risks of contact. I think that's probably what lots of parents are worried about, who's really getting in touch with their child. Risks of conduct, we think of those as bullying, sometimes sharing sexual images among the peer group, and risks also of contract, which is about the kind of commercial and datafied nature of the platforms. And those risks characterise children in different ways as part of different kind of networks with different motivations, and those also apply to the opportunities, which are many. And if you ask children and young people, they will talk first and foremost about socialisation. Social media is how they stay in touch with their friends. They also talk about it in terms of emotion management, how they kind of relax, escape a stressful school day, recover their sense of self, if you like. And of course, social media are a fantastic resource for information and learning.
Well, I guess the question for parents and for legislators as well is whether those risks outweigh those benefits. And often it's pointed out that we have seen since the arrival of smartphones and social media a rise in mental health problems, self-harm, suicide, eating disorders and so on. Is it evident, though, that this is caused by access to social media?
Well, identifying clear causes is always difficult in social science. We're talking about children in all their diversity as they grow up over perhaps 20 years it takes to grow up. So many factors always account for the outcomes that we're worried about. Is a child growing up healthy and happy? I think it's fair to say research now suggests social media plays some role in that, and it plays a greater role for some children than for others. But it's never the sole cause. It's not the thing that makes an otherwise kind of happy, healthy child have some really kind of problematic outcomes. So we have to see it in context, and we have to think, what is the balance of effects for children?
If it is playing a role, though, in those negative impacts, what do you think about the idea of a flat-out ban, whatever the age might be, and we can come to that, but banning it altogether for children, is it a good idea or a bad idea?
I think if we went back 15, 20 years to the start of social media, we would not say the present situation is what we wanted. We would not design it that way. And we would have put different laws in place 20 years ago. Actually, I think some people were calling for them then, and we should have done. So now we're in a situation where I think people are feeling quite frustrated with the efforts to regulate social media platforms. They're feeling quite frustrated with the options that they have as consumers in a marketplace for different kinds of platforms, different kinds of phones, different opportunities for their children. So a ban to me, it's too crude. It's too the same solution for everybody. It's not a solution because we know that but it's going to be very hard to introduce. That we, as you say, we can come to that. I've been listening to the news all week, and there's a kind of slippage from banning social media platforms and the harms that they might offer children to banning children. And banning children is against children's rights, it's against common sense. It's a very simplistic solution to a very complex problem.
If it is too simplistic, explain why you think it's too simplistic and crude. It sounds like an argument that there are, coming back to the benefits that are there for children, there should somehow still be a right for children to access those social benefits.
So in the 20 years we've developed social media, other things have happened as well. We have, I don't know so much about Australia. I can see in many countries we have made it quite hard for children to go out freely and mix with each other after school. Parents are very worried about traffic. They've kept their children home. Social media for society has become the way for children to see their friends, to hang out, to kind of share a culture together. They've moved away from television. Lots of other things have happened. So now to ban social media leaves us with a problem. What are we going to put in its place? Have we got the youth clubs, the parks, the safe streets for children? Are we ready to put something genuinely beneficial in its place? And
it's a really interesting point that we've all
yeah.
become so anxious about letting the kids roam the streets after school
Right.
that they have no other outlet.
Right. And I think in many countries the phone has seemed like a solution for parents to kind of keep their children safe, where they can see them, where they can keep an eye on them. I don't think anyone, I think everyone wants a balance. If you ask parents, research with children says they would like a balance. They would like to be free in their in-person life. They'd love to see their friends more often in person. But they also think social media is a place for some experimentation, a bit of risk-taking that their parents might not favour. Children's task in growing up in a way is to stretch themselves, to develop. I don't say social media is the ideal place as at present. My emphasis will be on redesign and better regulation.
But what do you say to the argument that a ban at least tells parents, tells teachers, tells kids as well, that and this comes to the age limit, whether it's 14, 15, 16, that age, it's really not okay to be on these platforms. Maybe there are other things you could do with the device online, or even, get out and roam the streets with your friends if that's what the family wants.
Yeah.
But there are other things you can do. But there's this social norm that at that particular age, you really shouldn't be on TikTok and these other platforms.
So, I think the difficulty in this conversation is that the platforms are what they are, and they have not really responded to what it is that either parents or children want. So they are designed to be attention grabbing. They are designed to push ever more extreme content at children, young people. I think we could probably all agree that that is not what we wanted for our children, and that's not what children want for themselves. That's a different thing from saying we've given children, for good reason, expensive, intelligent device that can connect them with others and provide them access with information. So, I really do think it's the design and regulation of the platforms that is our problem. But given that we as societies have not managed to deal with that effectively, yes, I understand the frustration that calls for a ban. it needs to come with alternatives, and it needs to come with other ways for children to be sociable, to
Have that
play, to
social
have fun,
connection.
to
No, exactly,
experiment.
and develop
Yeah,
that social skill.
yeah.
But if if a ban's not the right approach, just let's talk about
Mm,
what you're suggesting is a better solution when it
mm,
comes to, well, explain to us fixing the way these services are provided by social media platforms. What
mm.
practically can and should be done there?
Well, we are at a moment also of experimentation with regulation, which is why it's kind of curious that the call for bans comes now. So, in a number of countries, there are new regulations for online safety, which companies are beginning to respond to, platforms are beginning to respond to, and put in more safety mechanisms. We're there's a lot of development of online privacy and data protection, which is beginning to limit the ways in which platforms can grab children's data and use it to personalize content feeds that might be harmful for them. We're not there yet, and everyone, I think, would have liked this to have happened much faster.
Coming back to the risks that you initially identified, whether it's the bullying, whether it's the unwanted contact, those negative
Mm.
impacts of social media, is it possible on the platforms kids like to use to address those with regulation?
It is, but it will change. I think the crucial thing is the platforms will say they don't know who a child is. That really does matter, actually, when it comes to implementing the ban. I think it will mean that the platform offer will have to change for everybody. And what maybe the shift we need is more of a kind of an opt-in to for adults to violent or pornographic content rather than it's there for everybody. And we haven't figured out a way of making it age appropriate experience. We haven't figured out a way yet of making a child friendly experience. There are markets for children's services. There are markets for teen services. Platforms are not diversifying those markets because they're in a kind of winner take all mentality. They want the one cheap to run platform that provides the same thing for everybody.
And so
And that
wouldn't they
isn't
need
right
an
for children.
incentive to find that other offering that would be more age appropriate for kids? Would a ban at least give them the push
Yeah.
that they're going to need to make these changes and deliver a service that's okay for kids?
It's possible. It is possible, and it depends what the legislation is going to look like. So we're hearing a lot of talk about smartphone bans as well, rather than
Yeah, what do
social
you think of
media
those?
bans. Well, I think I'm just a bit allergic to the word ban in relation to children because it seems it seems so draconian and heavy-handed. I think, but we are beginning to see diversification in the market. Different kinds of phone offers, phones for children, phones where there are different controls, phones where the not all apps are available. I think we just have a very a kind of one size fits all
A
solution at the
black and white
moment, and that's
approach, yeah.
definitely not working.
Yeah, well,
Right.
look, we're seeing in a lot of schools, state jurisdictions here in Australia, imposing bans on phones and so on. But can I ask you about
Mm,
where we have seen some jurisdictions go with social media bans for kids? I think
mm,
Texas, Florida, Spain, they're all a little bit different. Is it possible to
mm.
know at the moment whether what impact those bans or restrictions have had, or is it still a bit early?
It is early, and it's also it does worry me that we don't always do the evaluation to see if a policy works. And there's something about the world of tech that means we're not evaluating. We could have learned a lot more over different ways of implementing um, children's digital lives in the last 10, 20 years. Um, I could say for smartphone bans in schools, we haven't really done the research, even though these policies are being implemented everywhere. There are a few studies. They tend to suggest it can work. Um, but there, it's a simpler question. It's if you remove the distraction, do children learn better? In the social media and children's general lives, it's if you remove the means of both risk and opportunity, what happens? What is the outcome? And we haven't done that research yet, so we don't know.
Well, presumably there will be more research, and you're right. It's always good to follow the evidence. But there is an almighty rush at the moment to make these decisions. If you take a nuanced approach to this, and Professor Livingston, we do appreciate you bringing, a more nuanced approach to it. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
And if you have any thoughts on this conversation, the idea of a social media ban for children, or any other ideas for the podcast, do drop us a line, insiders@abc.net.au, and we'll be talking about this on Sunday morning on The Couch. Hope to see you then.